Hi, I'm Gary Birchall.
And I'm Sean Noonan, lead designer on SENTRY.
You are defending a spaceship that is fleeing an Earth that has lost its final battle.
SENTRY online.
And aliens are trying to capture it.
Objective update.
And when they board your ship, you have to use deployables, which are the umbrella term used for traps and turrets, to defend your ship. And you can use environmental destruction and your own FPS abilities to take the fight directly to the enemy as well. Everyone on the team are big fans of first-person shooters, big fans of tower defense. We were trying to create a slightly new take on the action defense genre.
SENTRY's best moments are going to be when you're up against an overwhelming threat, your back's against the wall, and you've got to rely on every tool that you've got at your disposal.
SENTRY expired.
For a game to justify existence in the marketplace, it should be doing something new. It shouldn't just be rehashing existing games. Those games already exist.
SENTRY online. Objective update.
The way that we're building our AI is quite different to typical tower defense games because we're focusing on the minute-to-minute combat, which is something that doesn't really happen in action tower defense or tower defense itself. It's usually something you do to massage the trap placement, whereas we're trying to make that focus a bit more 50-50.
We're going to take a look at some of the moment-to-moment gameplay now. So when playing SENTRY, you'll be experiencing what we refer to as the dynamic campaign, which is what frames the entire game. That's where you're choosing where you're defending various parts of your ship against alien attacks. But when you decide to go in and defend a particular point, you'll then go into a level and engage in combat, what you're about to see.
So the player's currently moving from the hub of their ship via a transport pod where they're going to be entering the level. So at this point, they get to build out their loadout with different deployables and different abilities. So they're going through active and passives, as well as loading out their weapons as well. So once they've got the setup they like, they can deploy and enter the level.
SENTRY online.
So from here, the ship powers up with support systems. So the player can now start placing traps. They have an idea of where the enemies are coming from. They'll be cutting through the doors. You can just start placing traps to defend that particular avenue. You've seen a spike trap and this new exhaust trap we just added in. Thermal trap, so basically that shoots, the other one cuts. They have different strengths. And then there's some slow pads on the floor that slow the enemies down, so as they're coming through, they're more likely to get hit by the projectiles. And obviously you can finish them off with a gun. And that was an example of the active ability that this player's chosen. So they use the Vortex Glove and they can knock enemies back into other traps. And once they're all wiped out, they leave behind scrap, which you can then use to build more traps going forward.
I think when we were making the game, one of the things that we wanted to establish very early on and differentiate us from other examples in the genre was we wanted a player that felt really fast and powerful. A lot of times in the action defense genre, there's a lot of emphasis on the power coming from the traps and turrets that the player can place, and the player can sort of be a bit cumbersome. And I feel like that's something that's come together really well. It's made it a very interesting challenge to kind of shift the game a bit more in that direction.
There's a lot of references to shooter history that we're plugging into the game. Half-Life, Quake, Doom. Yeah, there's definitely like a synergy that we're trying to still build upon, like with the traps, with the turrets, and with the players' weapons as well. It's kind of trying to find that balance is the challenge that we're sort of up against every day. We're working on it, but right now there's a lot of new traps that have just gone in, so a lot of this stuff, a lot of these deployables are all still experimental. You can see like quite a mix of deployables here.
One of the things we found actually when we put that power focus on the player was that having AI that were very, drone-like and would just follow sort of a maze that the player had set wasn't really cutting it. So we had to kind of make AI that was going to be much better at basically doing a good job of fighting the player on their terms and outmaneuvering.
Yeah, we did start out by trying that, right? And it didn't quite. It was a bit flat.
Yeah, and so we ended up making an AI that was a bit more, I guess, more like a traditional FPS than a tower defense. But again, that was a tricky challenge for us, because in those games you are predominantly moving through an environment and the enemies are waiting to come through that environment, whereas it is the reverse, right? The enemies are coming through your environment.
Because the game looks like an ordinary first-person shooter, there's certain expectations that we have to kind of soften because we're offering something different. The move of having the space be a space that you explore multiple times, but have a different form of combat in each attack from the enemies. That was kind of an interesting problem to solve, and that's where the strategy element comes in that we'll show at a later date. But basically it means you're going to be getting used to some of these levels and working out some good strategies against different enemy types, depending on which doorways they're coming through, the configurations of those enemies as well.
Yeah, we're only showing a small subsection of enemies and weapons and traps and turrets in this. There's tons more that will be in the game or show imminently, but what I like is that there's a franticness about it, and I think that plays in really well. Prayer, for example, we shot a window, vented a bunch of enemies out into space. That's obviously a cool moment, but it all ties in together. It should feel frantic because you are facing overwhelming odds. You have to rely on stuff like this to get the edge.
So we hope you enjoyed that clip. Thanks to the London Games Festival for allowing us to share this. And thanks for watching.
And don't forget that what you see today is just a snippet of the game overall, because there's a whole dynamic campaign that whether you won or lost that level means that it only affects your ongoing fight for the ship. So please head to Steam and wishlist the game. Thanks for watching.